accelerate people and ideas to tackle agriculture's most important challenges. Our mission is to build trust and understanding where agriculture and society meet. Farm Foundation's Innovation and Education Campus brings that mission to life. Set on a historic 14-acre campus in Libertyville, Illinois, the Innovation and Education Campus is more than a meeting space. It's neutral ground for meaningful dialogue and bold thinking, a space for collaboration where seasoned experts and emerging leaders come together to inspire and drive change. Around the table, voices from across the food and ag value chain convene to listen deeply, plan strategically, and work collectively, turning conversations into connections. Join us at the Innovation Education Campus and be part of the movement shaping food and agriculture for generations to come. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us here today for the Farm Foundation Forum, Recasting Morrill, Reclaiming Relevance, the Future of Land-Grant Universities. I'm Tim Brennan, Vice President of Programs and Strategic Impact here at Farm Foundation, and it's a pleasure to present today's forum. Thank you all for joining us today. A very special thank you as well to Farm Credit for their generous support in helping make this important conversation possible. Before we get into today's program, I'm going to take a few minutes to share a bit more about Farm Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit working at the intersection of agriculture and society to address challenges that affect the entire food and ag value chain. Specifically, we're an accelerator for practical solutions for agriculture, accelerating people and ideas into action. The three levers we use to accomplish this are policy, innovation, and education. Forums such as today's are just one part of our extensive program of work, which is guided by our mission to build trust and understanding at the intersection of agriculture and society, and our vision to build a future for farmers, our communities, and our world. We rely on partnerships and coalitions to fund our work and increase our impact. So if you're interested in learning more about partnering with us, I encourage you to reach out. We'd also like to remind you that nominations are open for the 2026 Farm Foundation Awards. These awards recognize leaders, books, innovators, and up-and-coming voices shaping the future of food and agriculture. Nominations will close on December 8th, 2025, and the awards will be presented at the Farm Foundation Roundtable meeting in St. Louis in June of 2026. Anyone working in food and agriculture can be nominated, and self-nominations are absolutely welcome. Please check out the chat section to learn more. Thank you again for being part of today's forum. As a reminder, Farm Foundation is a nonprofit, and we rely on the generosity of people and partners like you to keep programs like this thriving. Forums like this, where experts and stakeholders across agriculture share the latest insights and solutions, are possible only because of that support. If you're inspired by what you hear today, I invite you to make a gift to help us to continue offering events like this at no cost to participants. Our team will post a secure link in the chat, and you can also visit farmfoundation.org and click the donate button at the top of the page. Farm Foundation shares a lot about what's happening in our work and across the sector on our social media pages. So please check out spaces like LinkedIn and Facebook to stay up to date on our work. And before we start today's forum, here's a few last notes. If you have questions for our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, not in the chat. This forum is being recorded and will be posted on our website at farmfoundation.org, as well as on our YouTube channel. And we'll send that link out today following today's program. When the forum concludes, you'll also receive a link with a brief survey. Farm Foundation appreciates your feedback and your time in completing that survey. All right, let's turn to today's forum. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jay Akridge. Jay is the Trustee Chair of Teaching and Learning Excellence at Purdue University, and he is a Farm Foundation Roundtable Fellow. Jay has held a variety of leadership positions with the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association, and regional research committees. With decades of experience in agribusiness strategy and technology adoption, he offers essential insights into how automation is shaping education, workforce development, and the future of agriculture. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, thanks very much, Tim. Let me add my welcome to everyone who's joined us today as we explore some of the challenges facing higher education and the future of land-grant universities, and particularly their role in helping rebuild trust with the public. I really appreciate the opportunity to moderate this panel, and I'm pretty sure I know what landed me in the role. So after stepping away from 16 years in administration at Purdue, serving as Dean of the College of Ag here and also Provost, I've been focusing some of my work on issues facing higher education. So a colleague, David Hummels, former Dean of the Business School here, and I write a weekly blog or Substack on higher education. So it's called Finding Equilibrium, and in the blog, we take on a lot of the topics we're going to be discussing today. So check it out if you're interested in what's going on in higher ed. It is free, so you may get what you pay for. So anyway, but very glad to, again, very excited about this panel. And as many of you know, it is really a challenging time for higher education broadly. Public trust in higher ed has been on the decline for some time. And some of you may have seen an NBC poll earlier this week that reported one third of those surveyed did not believe a college education was worth the cost. You know, we hear concerns about cost, we hear concerns about debt, completion rates. Lots of students start college, not enough finish. People ask questions about, are students prepared for that step into the work world? You know, we get questions, maybe criticisms about university research integrity and relevance. Are we working on the right things? And certainly within the land grant context, people ask questions about the future of extension. So lots of headwinds out there for the sector. You know, at the same time, financial returns to a college degree are very strong for the vast majority who finish. And we just completed a study with USDA that's done every 5 years looking at employment opportunities for ag students. And demand for students with ag degrees is expected to remain really strong. And of course, university research enterprise is really an integral part of the overall U.S. research ecosystem. So, you know, how should higher ed respond to these headwinds? Specifically, what's the role of land grant universities today and going forward? You know, as we look to rebuild public trust. So most everybody in attendance on this webinar are going to know the history of the land grant story, so we're not going to go into all that. But, you know, established in 1862 with the Morrill Act, with a focus on providing access to higher education for those who did not have that opportunity. And later we added mandates to conduct research aimed at addressing societal problems. And then, of course, taking the university to the people through the Smith-Lever Act and the formalization of what we know now as extension. So we're going to focus today a bit on how land-grant universities can address these challenges facing higher ed and help the sector rebuild public trust and get into the future of land-grant universities in the process. And we really got an outstanding panel to help consider these issues. And these are individuals I've had the privilege to work with for many years, really looking forward to their perspectives. And I'm going to introduce them now. So first, I'd like to introduce Nancy Cox. Nancy served as Dean of the Martin Gatton College of Agriculture, Food, and Environment, and is the first Vice President for Land Grant Engagement at the University of Kentucky. So Nancy's a passionate advocate for the land grant mission and has worked extensively with the college's many partners to promote teaching, research, and extension programs. Prior to her tenure as Dean, she served as University of Kentucky's Associate Dean and Director for the Kentucky Agricultural Experiment Station. And in that role, she furthered the college's land grant mission as a leader in research and development by prioritizing investments in veterinary diagnostics, animal equine health and safety, and animal and forage production. Welcome, Nancy. Glad to have you here today. Next, I would like to introduce Sunny Ramaswamy. Sunny most recently served as president of the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, one of our higher education accrediting agencies. Prior, Sunny was appointed by President Barack Obama to lead USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, where he advanced research, innovation, and education to address major societal challenges. Sunny's also held key academic leadership roles, including serving as Dean of the Oregon State University College of Agricultural Sciences, and he was here at Purdue as our director of the Purdue Agricultural Research Program. In addition, Sunny was appointed to the UN Committee on World Food Security's high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition. Welcome, Sonny. Glad to have you as well. And finally, I'd like to introduce Marshall Stewart. Marshall serves as the Executive Vice President for External Engagement and Chief of Staff at Kansas State University. He's a nationally recognized leader in higher education partnerships that strengthen communities and expand the university's impact. Marshall's been actively involved with the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities and the Engagement Scholarship Consortium and the National 4-H and FFA organizations. Before coming to Kansas State, Marshall served as Chief Engagement Officer for the University of Missouri System, and he's also previously served in a variety of leadership roles at North Carolina State University. Marshall began his career as a high school agriculture teacher. Welcome, Marshall. So again, you can see we've got a terrific group of individuals joined here today to help us think through some of these key challenges facing higher education. I've got a few questions to get us started, and we're anxious to address as many questions as we can from you. So put those in the Q&A segment of the of our platform, and we're going to get to as many of those questions as we can. So we're going to jump right in. And Sonny, this first question is for you. So if the Morrill Act were written today, what do you believe the core mandate would be? And how does that differ from how land-grant universities currently operate?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jay, for having me as part of this excellent panel. I'm truly honored, and I want to thank Tim Brennan and the Farm Foundation as well. Appreciate your kind invitation, Tim, to be part of this really critically important conversation. And Jay, as you said in your introductory comments, America is at a crossroads in terms of where we're at, in terms of the value of higher education, the value of the innovation engine that we have been, America has been for, a very long time. And in part, we've had these geopolitical things that are going on. In part, it is, I give a lot of talks and write a lot about these issues as well. And I often invoke POGO. And I say that I've seen the enemy and he's us. And in many, we're in many ways, we're the enemy. And I think we've not done as good a job. But going back to, I'm not going to go into dredging the history, but as our listeners know, ever since the founding of this republic, starting with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, there's been an effort to democratize education. And you, Jay, you and the others know that going back into the 1600s, when we started establishing this nation, we had the Harvards and the Yales and the Princetons and other institutions. And the children of the rich and famous went there. And it was actually, individuals that went there to get an education to become clergy, for example. And then this idea of democratization, and you've got Baldwin Turner and others in Illinois and other places that wanted to start doing things that allowed for us to bring people in to get an education, particularly in agricultural and mechanic arts and things like that. And it was only Justin Smith Morrill he tried multiple times, and finally in the 1860s, 1862 on July 2, that Abraham Lincoln, as we know, signs into law. And when he signs this creation of the land-grant university colleges into law, he allegedly states that these, and there's no reference per se of this, but he invokes this idea that these colleges that are going to democratize education, offer an opportunity for people to get an education out of the hinterland, and they would get themselves and our nation out of the morass of poverty. Those are really critically important things to consider as well. And so since July 2, 1862, the land-grant institutions have evolved from the beginnings. And they've fueled economic innovations, they've fueled economic growth in agriculture and engineering and in other fields as well. As a matter of fact, we should all be proud that the United States, because of the efforts of scientists and others at land-grant universities and what they have done to enable what's happening in the world of food and agriculture in America and the rest of the world, we've gotten to where we are, where we have fewer than 2% of our population that's involved in production agriculture. That means it gives the remaining population, the over 98% of the population, to innovate, to have the luxury of time to, in quotes, put a man on the moon, invent the internet and things like that. That's what this allows us to do. Right? And so that's been part of it. And the other second part of it is that the cost of food, as you know, Jay, as an economist, the cost of food in America is, less than on average, we spend, less than about 10 cents per dollar of every dollar that we earn on food, that we spend on food. And in other countries, if you compare us, it's significantly higher. And in fact, if you go to Africa and Asian countries and things like that, they may end up spending about 80% cents of every dollar on food. So it gives us the luxury of time and the money to do other things as well. So this has been evolving since then. And, we have the Second Morrill Act that brings in African Americans into the fold of the land grants. Then we've got the Hatch Act and the Smith-Lever Act and the McIntyre-Stennis Act and the Equity in Education Act. And then finally, as recently as 2008, we've got the Hispanic Serving Agricultural Colleges and Universities as well. That's what's been happening. Okay, it's been a phenomenon. And yet I think that the vision that was articulated way back when by Abraham Lincoln and Justice Smith Morrill is a vision that's yet to be fully realized. And that full realization, I think, requires us to start rethinking how we do this, right? We got to rethink the compact and the mandate that we have. The compact has been between these, in quotes, colleges and the public. And that compact has frayed quite a lot. And we need to, think that and re-engineer it and reimagine it. There's, as we all know, and you referred to it, Jay, there's a crisis of public trust. There is, along with that, and this crisis of public trust is really, from my perspective, as I've looked at it over the last many years, is this arms race that we've got between the universities. Right? Everybody wants to be the best there. We're number one. We're number one. It's almost like we're hearkening back to what happens on the athletic field as well. So I think that idea, and we've also become more elitist. I mean, with all due respect, even Purdue University and the University of Illinois and others that were built as, institutions for all of us have become elitist. Right? And that's in part something that's contributed to the situation as well. I think we've got this crisis that we've got. And I'd like to invoke Paul Romer, another, economist who received the Nobel Prize, Jay, as you know. And he talks about how a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, right? Here's a crisis. Let's not waste it. Let's go ahead and grab a hold of it and try to rethink, re-engineer, reconnect the mission to public values and purpose. What's the value proposition? We've kind of forgotten about it. Right? We're going to have to realign all of the things that we end up doing, re-engage with stakeholders, and this elitism that we've got, right? We got to go and seek the input from our stakeholders, right? We got to re-engineer and reimagine. I think that's really critically important that we need to think about as well. And we can talk a little bit more about this, how this reimagination and re-engineering can take place. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Sonny. I think an excellent way to kick us off with a bit of history, but also the challenge in front of us. And to your point, this crisis is a time to revisit the way we do things and what value we create. And we're going to get into that right now. And we're going to start with the education mission. So, Nancy, we're going to go to you on this particular question. So that original Morrill mission, as Sonny talked about, centers on education and access. And are we delivering on this mission, or are there areas where we're failing? And how do we get better with the educational mission that is really central to our charge as universities writ large, but especially land-grant universities?
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for the Farm Foundation for hosting this. And Sonny referenced the POGO from 1971. We've seen the enemy, and he is us. And then Jay, in your paper with Malone and Anderson recently, you talked about the notion that institutions have lost trust, and you mentioned that nobody even argues for the proof of that. We just all believe in that. And so back when all this was started with the Morrill Act, there was trust, there was optimism, there was the frontier mentality that we could use some of our frontier to fund higher ed. And I think, put simply, then the Morrill Act was to mostly let states decide how to organize their majors and teach in ag and mechanic arts. Ag was a much bigger industry or much bigger activity than it is today. The industrial part of it was kind of self-explanatory, was starting important at this time in the mechanical arts, but it was so simple. There was a belief in science that could be applied to ag. Again, a time of optimism, a focus on the states taking care of themselves, which led over into both the research and extension acts of later years. But today, if we were going to say we were going to help the state's economy and help its people, our economies are infinitely more complex and would require a lot of resources from the land grant universities. I would argue we have built a lot of those resources already. We partner with all kinds of industries. Maybe we should double down on that as well. But also now, and Sunny mentioned, we have some land grant universities who are not as open access to all their people as they once were. We also have community and technical colleges that are doing a lot of the training that the land grant universities originally might have been expected to do. We also have corporations that do their own training. So to start to create the new mission, so to speak, I think it would be to address more directly all the things that create an economy of the state and all the things that the people need, the citizens of the state need to succeed.
I think, yeah, it's a really important point. I think, at the time, we launched the land grant model, there weren't other options. And today, obviously, the providers of education, there are many more specialized in different areas. And sort of what access even means today is different. And I think that, to your point, gets us into the mode of trying to think through what does that mean now for a contemporary land grant, given a lot of options, a lot of needs that are much more complicated, and then what's our lane within all of that, and how do we contribute? So let me go ahead and get Marshall involved here too. So Marshall, let's turn our attention to extension for a moment. And it was a revolutionary idea in 1914. We had this charge to do research that was aimed at addressing societal problems, but they said you got to unlock that and put it in the hands of people that could actually use it. And so extension came to us in 1914 with the Smith-Lever Act. But now today, in a world of the internet and YouTube, et cetera, some are saying it's irrelevant. We just don't need that presence anymore, and so it's irrelevant. And does it add value today? And what does a revolutionary model look like going forward?
Well, Jay, again, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. And as you know, I love talking about this stuff and have had the opportunity, as others have, to do a lot of thinking and a lot of talking and a lot of restructuring around extension in my career at NC State and at Mizzou and now at Kansas State University. And so it's a real pleasure to be with you. And thank you to the Farm Foundation again for bringing all this up today. I think it's really important that we have these conversations, but I also think it's important that we act. And so I'm going to walk right into that. If you look at the Land Grant Act, as Sonny really brought up and sort of framed well how we got to where we are, kind of thing, where we need to go. And then again, Nancy really talking about that access piece and how maybe we walked away from some of that. I think it's important to think about the sort of the trajectory of land grants. In 1862, it was about access and opportunity and the sons and daughters of toil, if you will, bringing them in. And they realized in the 1880s, but 1887 roughly, that that's not enough. We got to go where the people are. So the Ag Experiment Station was really the first advent of going to the people. That's where it really began to happen. You were going into community, and you built this Ag Experiment Station, or research centers as we call them today, to really get closer to the public and to show demonstration of what could happen on the ground in their community. But that wasn't enough, so they had to federalize that and go to county, and that was 1914 with the extension coming into play in the Smith-Lever Act. But I'm going to say today, as we start this conversation about extension, it's more than a line item. I think a lot of us get caught up in Smith-Lever and line items. It's not about a line item. It's about an idea, and an idea is powerful. And that's where we've got to focus ourselves in terms of extension. And my trajectory coming out of what would have been considered a great extension system, and certainly had a traditional model in terms of the county partnerships and all the things we have, and those things are so important. And now you look across the country, roughly 3,000 plus counties that we touch in different ways. It's really it's important, and it's probably more intentional today that we must be if we're going to really recapture the American public. And I think the best way to do that for land grants is through extension. I truly believe that. I've seen that happen. I've seen what happens when you win county by county, community by community, and you bring people back to an understanding of what the university is about. And land grants have an advantage because we have this thing called extension. And in Kansas, it's 105 counties. And it enables us to touch literally people where they live. And so I think it's important for us to think about what's happened in this country. When we lost state support, we've seen a decline in that in all of our states. Well, that's on us. Sonny said it well. Some of that's on us. And what we've got to do is get that back. If you want to win Topeka, in my opinion, if we want to win Topeka, we got to win Kansas. All of us think about our state capitals. We think about D.C. We think about going in and doing that work. And I oversee government relations here as well as part of my portfolio. But if you want to win Topeka, if you want to win the state capital, you got to win the community. That's where you win it. Win the state. And so I think extension gives you that opportunity. But in order to do that, you got to make extension bigger, bolder, more aggressive, more nimble, more flexible than it's ever been. And we got to get ourselves beyond thinking about those traditional areas. Now, when I say that, a lot of my extension friends get really nervous because they say, well, what about agriculture? What about 4-H? What about nutrition programs and FCS? And what about community programs and all the things we do? We can do that and more. It's not an or, it's and more. And the way you do that is you got to realize that, in my opinion, we've got a lot of land grant universities who claim to be land grant universities, but are only land grant truly in a certain college. And typically that's a college of agriculture. That's where the tripart mission really shows up. There are very few universities in this country that really live out land grant at the university level because extension never is allowed to get to that level. You've got research, you got a VPR, you got a provost that's teaching and learning, you've got all those pieces, but very few institutions really have extension at that university level. And if you really are land grant university, my challenge to all the people watching, if you want to be a land grant university, you got to act like it. And that means extension, engagement, all those things have to be at the center point of the institution. It has to be. Like Nancy's a good example. She's a VP for land grant. Well, that's a move by Kentucky, thankfully, to do that. I had it at Mizzou. I was not only system, but also campus-wide and statewide. I have it here. It's a part of my portfolio. Extension reports into me now. We moved it into that. It doesn't mean we forget the college. It means we bring it along with us. So what you have to do is really reshape how extension is done at the community. And this is where it really changes. Fundamentally, we have been all about, and we should have been for many years, about content delivery, about expertise that we have. We don't have to walk away from any of that. But the power of extension is connectivity. So think about content and connectivity. If you want to reshape extension in your state and you want to reshape it with an 1862 or 1890 or even our 1994 partners who work with us in different ways, we got to figure out how to do that differently. And what the power of the extension agent or the specialist at the county level, whatever they may be called, or an educator in some states, the power they have is not only content, but it's connectivity. So you got to fix it there. You got to lean into that. And you got to realize that that 4-H agent who's in that community may know someone who has perhaps an issue with in a rural community with mental health. Well, maybe they don't have the content to deliver on that, but they have the connectivity to bring that local person in that community to a specialist, maybe in arts and science on a campus that can really be helpful, or maybe in a college of medicine that can really be helpful. So it takes a couple things. One is community at the community level, county level, expertise. You got to continue to be content deliverers, but you also got to lean into connectivity. And your performance system at that level has to recognize both. At the campus level, we have to open this thing up. We got to be more, and I love agriculture. I'm an ag ed person. My tenure's in agriculture, so please don't think I'm walking away from agriculture. I love agriculture. It's what I grew up around. That's what I know. But we got to be bigger than that. And I truly believe that extension has to be more than a line item. It can't be restricted by that. It needs to be enabled by that. And we need to find ways to get colleges, be it engineering, be it business, be it law, be it medicine, wherever your campus is, how can they buy into? It's almost like a human internet system. And this was given to me about a number of years ago. I was pitching this idea to someone that many of you will know, Randy Woodson, who was recently stepped down as chancellor. at North Carolina State, and I was pitching this, and he was trying to help me think through. He said, "What you're saying is this is a human internet." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "We were the internet before the internet." So to your question, Jay, it's not that AI and it's not that YouTube is going to replace us. It's going to enable us to do more. And what we've got to do is lean into the human capacity, the connectivity, which people yearn for. We also know that our content delivery, we do it well, be it through digital platforms or one-on-one. We got to keep that, but we make it bigger. We engage that. I have found in working in this space now, especially in the last decade at Mizzou and at Kansas State, there is a desire in colleges of business, in colleges of engineering, human and health sciences, whatever it may be, to engage. We just have to give them a way to do that. And that doesn't deplete extension, it actually brings resources to you. And so I really want to encourage people to think differently and think about the idea. Are we, and I'll close with this, Jay, and because this is an extension point, are we a land grant university? Or are we a land grant university only in a certain college? Because the extension mission has to be just as central as research and teaching if we really want to live that out. And I don't think Lincoln and those guys probably could see that far out. But I want to imagine that if we were recasting it today, as to build on what Sonny and Nancy have said, I think we would recast it central. And we'd say we're going to be this in all three areas, and we're going to be complementary to one another, because we know that good extension work informs good teaching on the campus. We know good teaching informs what we do in community. We know good research comes from community and it impacts community. These things are not siloed. They have to be integrated, but integrated at the highest level. So again, it excites me to be here, to be a part of this. I think extension is relevant. It's needed. It does need to be reshaped. And it's hard because you're dealing with lots of players and lots of stakeholders who get nervous. But we got to get people to think about not scarcity, but abundance. And if we want to reshape the narrative of higher education, you can't market yourself out of this. It's got to be one-to-one in community, and extension is the way to best do that among land grants.
Yeah, a lot of really important points, Marshall, and certainly philosophically, you and I are on the same page with respect to the benefits not only to the communities of campus-wide engagement, but the benefits to our research and teaching programs. I think relevance is sort of at the center of lost trust, and the more relevant we can be to society, the more likely we are to have a trusting relationship with them. And extension provides a key to help us be relevant through our research and teaching missions. And to your point earlier, I think, at an environment when YouTube and AI is running around, that same paper Nancy referenced, people are looking for trusted sources of advice and information. There's no problem getting stuff, today. The challenge is sorting it through and finding things that have something underneath it of substance. And I think, to your point, it may create an opportunity. A lot of work to do, but a lot of opportunities there as well. So thanks much. Sonny, let's kind of close off our three missions talking about research then. And obviously you have a tremendous amount of experience in that space, but land grants, and we really do have this unparalleled research engine, but a lot of times people don't see the impact and they question the work that's being done. Are we working on the wrong things? Are we failing to communicate? How can we get better in the agricultural research enterprise?
Thanks so much, Jay. And I really want to pick up on where Marshall left it, and also where Nancy did too. And I think that the key difference between what happens within the land grant environment as opposed to other environments is the connectivity in between the three pillars of land grants. The research, extension, and education enterprise. And I think the success that we've had over the last many, many decades, well over a century and a half, is in part because of that connectivity that we've got as well. And then, as Marshall referred to it, this is the only enterprise where the discovery process is taking place that is driven by understanding what the problems are. That's the way it started. And then those discoveries have been translated. And then that knowledge has been disseminated to the end users, whether it's the farmers or the children or the parents or and others as well. That's been the effort that really contributed to our success in land grant universities and America's success in large measure. When Vannevar Bush at the request of Eisenhower, creates this effort, this vision to create the National Science Foundation. In that vision, if you reread Vannevar Bush's approximately 50-page document, he does not speak to the idea that this discovery and innovation need to be translated so they're adapted to the local needs and things like that. He does not do that. This enterprise that you and I, the rest of us are involved in, we need to be really, really proud of it. However, going back to the situation that we've got, this distrust and lack of, knowledge about what it is that we do and things like that. And there's a question by Brent Siegel here about, this distrust that we've got and what's happening in America. And then literally we've exported this, by the way, to the rest of the world as well. It comes about again in part because of this lack of demonstrating what that value is. Marshall talked about how it's not just going to Topeka, Kansas, or Salem, Oregon, or the other state capitals, and going to Washington D.C. once every so often, right? All of us, head out there in the month of February, March to go ahead and lobby and things like that. No, I think it's like it's not a one and done. It's an everyday thing. We're gonna have to, when I was interviewed, in quotes, by Secretary Tom Vilsack to take on the role of directing the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, he asked me what I want to do. And I said, I want to preach the gospel of science and how science can enable the human well-being. That's what it's all about. And he was very, impressed with that. He said, yes, go and do it. And I think that's a critically important part of it, that we got to be engaged, we got to be connected. And going back to Brandt's question as well, this distrust and things like that is because, in part, this false narrative that's been created. The false narrative that's been created by, a whole bunch of people across America is in part because you and I, we've done a, shitty job of conveying what the critical importance of this enterprise is about. It's about food and agriculture. And here we've got these tech bros like, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and other guys going, oh, AI is going to take care of all this, right? And when I have seen those things over the last 2 or 3 years, and I've said to them, oh, who's going to put food on your table? AI is not going to feed you. It's going to be these discoveries, these innovations that are coming along that need to be translated, that need to go be, delivered. That's what's going to put food on our tables. That's what's going to generate the things that we are used to, right? The AI tech bros, they are not going to be able to do what they're doing were it not for the fact that our farmers and ranchers and livestock producers are busting their tails to put that food on the table, and they don't recognize that either. And I think we've done a piss poor job of conveying that sense of what's at stake here. Okay. But going back to this research engine that we've got, are we working on the wrong things? Are we, is there a failure to tell our story, things like that? Not necessarily. It is yes and no, right? It again goes back to this elitism and this we're number one attitude that we've got. I got to get more grants. I got to get my paper in science. I got to get my paper in the proceedings of the National Academy of Science. And then once it's done, I'm going to pat myself on the back. But I always remind people that I've mentored, myself as well as I was growing up, is that the paperwork is not done until we take that knowledge and translate that with the help of our extension colleagues and then get it to where it's needed. That's the key part of what it is that we do, right? It's harkening back to the future. We've been great at doing that. And we kind of forgot. Right? We got lost in the 1980s and 1990s and early 2000s. So reconnecting with the communities and stakeholders that Marshall referred to is something we need to go back to, right? Integrating, and again, there's some questions about this as well. Reintegrating, not just integrating, reintegrating. Really, really, it's incumbent on people, Jay, like you were as a dean, as a provost, and Nancy and Marshall and myself. There's many others here as well online. That it's our responsibility to make sure we're holding our colleagues' feet to the fire. Rethink how we do, tenure and things like that, which is focused on, these publications and things like that. Now, what's the impact that you're having on your local communities, on your local needs? That's a really important thing to consider as well. And along with that, a couple other items before I, stop is the significance, the value proposition that I referred to and the others have referred to as well. How does it impact the local and global food security? How does it impact health? How does it impact, address climate change? This existential threats that we've got. And we've done a really lousy job of conveying that. We got to do that. We got to go back to harken back to that, right? And how can we create these? We talk about, we have these transdisciplinary, efforts, and we have centers and things, but we're still siloed, as Marshall said as well. And we need to break down those silos and really think about it. And again, it's not something new. This is already, we've been doing it, right? How do we engage and rewarding? How do we reward faculty and staff and others on how they engage, how they create these partnerships, right? There's another question about these partnerships and things like that as well. And then we, as has been stated multiple times, this enterprise has been the source of objective, science-based information. There's a lot of fake news that's being perpetrated, right? The anti-science, anti-intellectualism environment that we've created in America. I mean, mind-boggling to me that this country invented these things, and yet we've got this environment. Again, shame on us collectively for having allowed this to happen, right? So we really got to, not just rethink, but really think what we've done previously and get back to it and become energized and inspired to make a difference in people's lives. That's been the hallmark of land grants and the research and extension enterprise that we've been involved in. Thank you.
Yeah, Sonny, boy, a number of really important points there. And I think, central there was this business of impact and making a difference is part of our DNA. And yet maybe we've drifted away from that. And purpose-driven research matters, but we got to help it get that last mile into the hands of people that can actually put it to work. And what that looks like today is different, but it's certainly a charge. And you mentioned incentives and reward structures that help people know that's part of their job to take the last step. I think a really important point. And again, I can't agree more with the communication piece. I mean, one of the things that would drive me absolutely crazy is, Dean, you'd be out sharing something and you would hear, they'd say, you're just a best kept secret. And I thought, how damning, when the things you're doing, you're known as a best kept secret. I mean, you can't be that. People have got to understand what you're up to and why it makes a difference. And you got to listen to them in terms of what they can tell you about how to get better. So I think is a really important point. Did you have another comment, Sonny?
Real quick, sorry, you reminded me. And you may recall, Jay, when I was back in Washington, D.C., we tried to, create this enterprise to communicate the science that remove the shroud of secrecy, right? Yep. I'd asked our colleagues across America, send me one story per month from your institution, right? Yep. I was expecting to be inundated with these amazing stories that I would pass on to Secretary Vilsack, would pass it on to President Obama and all that. And I got maybe one or two per month, and that too was like pulling teeth. Right? There's so many amazing stories happening at the local level. It's a well-kept secret. There's a shroud of secrecy. It's almost like we're ashamed to tell the story that's out there. Amazing stories that are going on. So I want to share that with you as well.
Yeah, no, a great point. And again, a great example of something that can be done to help lift up and make more visible the enterprise. So let me ask one more question. Then we got a lot of questions from the audience. So I'm gonna ask one more for Nancy, and then we're going to open it up a bit here. So Nancy, I mean, we're going to get back to partnerships now. I mean, ultimately, land grants were created to serve the states, the communities, industries, particularly agriculture early on. But how should partnerships with agriculture, business, communities change in the next decade to keep land grants central to economic workforce development and just make broader contributions to societal welfare?
Thanks, Jay. And I would argue that land grants are doing a pretty good job with all the three missions, trying to serve our communities and so on. But I wanted to reflect on something Marshall said about our people's confidence in us starting on the ground. And then Sonny talking about how we can better communicate our research engine. And I want to tell a story. Eddie Melton, the president of Kentucky Farm Bureau, gave me permission to tell this. But I asked him what he thought about the experiment station. I know Farm Bureau loves extension. I said, what do you think about the experiment station? He goes, well, we like the discoveries you make, but we never get to really meet the people all that much. And think about that. He said, I'd love to talk to the researchers more. And I take from that, our constituents at the ground level would like to have a better sense of the why and the commitment that our researchers apply to our states. And experiment station directors have a tough job because they have two audiences: the big research engine audience through the vice president for research, as well as the the constituents, the commodity groups, and so on. So I think we could do better telling our story better for what we are doing and getting folks to know our mission areas better. I'd also like to talk about the notion of partnering with your states that infuses the Morrill Act and the other acts that we work under. And that is, we already have a lot of engagement. APLU has a commission on engagement that does awards every year. And most of those universities that are doing real engagement with their communities and their industries in their state are land-grant universities. They're not all. But I think we have good partnerships already. But I believe, and this gets back to a lot of conversations that have spurred from Jay's article, we need to communicate better. We need to be the peers rather than the ivory tower people. We need to get down and double down on working with people where they are, and communicating that we do happen to have a certain set of knowledge, but we're not smarter than anyone else. We have to partner at that level. So I think land-grant universities have to commit to this. Marshall made me think about the fact that all land-grant universities don't declare that as their main mission. Luckily, my university does, University of Kentucky, but all land-grant presidents don't communicate that same thing. So how do we, and that's a big order, how do we change the mindset, and how do we make better partnerships with our existing industries? But we're already doing a lot for workforce development. We're already doing a lot for societal welfare, mostly in the colleges of agriculture, as Marshall noted, but ready to have, and many universities, including UK, have started to have partnerships with extension with other colleges, including the healthcare mission. So those are some things that maybe serve for some food for thought as what we can think about going forward.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think another really important point there about, again, the more, quote, elite, the more ivory tower we are, the less connections we have, and the less likely people are to see us as a partner and again, a source of particular areas where we can contribute to the things that they're trying to accomplish. So I think that's a really important point. So
Jay, can I add one point to that?
Please do.
Because I think it really deals with this public trust thing. If you look at the history of extension in particular, it was really about when extension really federalized, and I think this really gets to where we've lost the trust, because when it was federalized, the extension agent that was deployed into the community outside of the public school teacher was probably the only other college educated person in many of our small town rural communities. Definitely. And so we were in a time of we created knowledge based on community need, and we pushed it in. Nancy makes a great point here. No longer are we the know-it-alls. They have great intelligence. They are very smart in community. They have access to information. Whether or not we agree with how they perceive that information or not, they have access in most communities. We have to see the community as a partner. We come in with our best ideas. They come in, and that's where the idea, you hear this in university language now, the word engagement. And I really think that's important. It's not just about extending knowledge. It's about engaging with community. And when you do that, great things happen. Number one, it becomes sustainable in that community because they buy in, they feel it. How many times have we seen universities go in and do research in community, leave, and never come back and say what happened? It happens all the time. And it not only happens in land grants, it happens in publics. One of the things I've been really fascinated by in my life of doing this work now, I can't believe I'm saying that, Jay, my life of doing this, is that so many small regional universities are doing it so fast. They're nimble. They don't have this bureaucracy of money, of line items that we have the advantage of, that oftentimes gets in the way of us just doing stuff. I think if we could get ourselves out of the bureaucracy, well, you can't do that, or we got to figure out how to break through that. I know one of the questions I saw pop up was, how do you do that without hurting extension? Well, there's a way to do it. When a faculty member does an NSF grant, there's this whole thing called broader impact. They can build that in there to do more than broader impact within the local community. They can build it out big and actually help Extension fund curriculum to deliver through 4-H. There's ways to do that. There's all kinds of money that come through medical centers and through colleges of medicine to do community health work. If we could connect it right, they can partner. They can bring the money to Extension to engage with that and push it out. There's a way to do that because, again, Extension and the land grant system has this connectivity. Folks, I'm going to tell you, we are sitting in the center point of helping to improve this. But one of the questions that I saw pop up too was we got to quit thinking about returning to we got to be careful we don't think about returning to the past. This is about the new way forward. And the new way forward is going to have us think more interdisciplinary. I know, Sonny, you've done a lot of work in that space about interdisciplinary work, multidisciplinary, interinstitutional. We don't know it all. Sometimes it might mean a K-State partnering with a KU because they've got a knowledge point that could go into community that we just don't have. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. And I can tell you in a community, they don't care who brings it to them, who helps them. If it means KU and K-State coming into a community, us leveraging our network because we have trust to bring in something, a knowledge point from another institution, that's good. And that's one of the things that I really bought into and saw happen during my Missouri experience because I worked across 4 universities there, Mizzou and 3 others. And we got to break down those barriers. They're institutional barriers, they're internal, they're external. We got to do good things for our people. If we do the right thing for our people in our communities, and quit worrying about the credit. Sonny talks about this, about the elitism and us having this nuclear arms race. We got to be better. If we just do the right things, the people will come toward us because they'll see us again reclaiming and actually claiming for the future our rightful place as stewards. And we have to be stewards. We have an opportunity to be the stewardship of unbiased information, the stewardship of integrity. We got to get that back. And I think we can get that in a new way forward that makes people want and yearn for what we offer. And that excites me. I've seen it happen in my career. I've seen where we recapture that and what it does. And I think we can do more of that. So again, these guys brought up a lot of stuff there, Jay, that just gets me really excited. And I think, but these questions too are really pointing us toward that, not to reclaim, but to claim forward what we want to be in the future. And that's really, really important. And I think central to the future of higher education.
Yeah, and I want to get into questions now, but I think this point's really important, and someone made it in the Q&A. I think the point is not to relive past glory. That's not the issue. I think the point is the people that actually put the thought in and launched the notion of the land grant were absolutely brilliant in concept. The notion of access to education, the notion of doing relevant work that made a difference for society, that doesn't change, but how we do it has to evolve. And I think that's our point going forward.
Yeah, one of the things I say here in Kansas, there's 2.8 million people that live in the state of Kansas. That's Kansas. When I was in Missouri, it was 6.2. When I was in North Carolina, it was 10 million. So you can see I'm getting smaller in scale as I go. But the thing is, we have to see them, number one, as our stockholders, not just stakeholders, because they literally fund. Now, I wish they would do more, but I'm thankful for what they do, and I treat them that way. How do we treat people that donate the biggest portions, these big chunks of money on a Saturday? We take them in the suite. We treat them with all the nuances that we have in athletics, and we should. But we need to treat Kansans that way in my case. We also need to treat them as a student body. I tell people here, we got 21,316 students on this campus. We went up 1,000 this year. We're really excited about that. But our real student body is 2.8 million Kansas. Mm-hmm. And if we do good things in Kansas, we'll do good things around the world. I'd say the same thing if I was in Kentucky, Nancy. I'd say the same thing if I was at Oregon, Sonny, where you were at one point, or Purdue. We've got to do good things and recapture that trust. And if we can do that, because we have a network that enables us to do it, but we have to reframe the network. We have to bring new partners in. We have to figure out how to bring those dollars together. There's a way to do this, and I think it's just and when you think about what's under pressure today, I'll shut up with this one. What's under pressure today more than anything else in our society is probably the middle class. And you know what the land grant system did? It created the middle class. If you look back at history, there was no middle class in 1862. There was elite, affluent, and there was everybody else. And it opened up a door and people could come get education. So now you fast forward that. Fast forward that to today. Middle class is under pressure. They don't see a way up. You have limited economic mobility. You have limited social mobility. Those two fundamentals, land grant did that in the 1800s and early 1900s. We did that. We can get that again and rebuild that middle class, which is where most people live. Most of us, many of us came out of some segment of that, at least if we were lucky. Others did not, but we all have had a chance to have that economic and social mobility. And that's really what land grants have the tremendous opportunity to do, not just for those from agriculture, but for really society. And that grows the trust, but it also grows the economy, workforce, economic development, those things that really matter to people, legislators, policymakers, citizens. They care about that stuff. We got to listen to them and what they care about and frame ourselves and bring it. We're doing the right things. We just are not connecting the dots for people to understand that in the right way.
So a lot of great questions now that we've got. So let's jump in. We got a question here, and I think Sonny, this one's probably maybe one to start with you. This is on research. All the speakers seem to agree there's distrust in institutions, but there also seems to be a distrust in hostility for fact and science-based approaches in many fields, including ag. There's ample evidence that U.S. ag research funding's flatlined or worse, and major competitors, China, are quickly outpacing U.S. ag research. Where do you see it going? What can land grants do about this trend when nationally policymakers are disrupting financial support for research? So any thoughts on that one?
Thanks so much, Jay. And I read that question, and I thought you'd probably, pile it on to me to speak to as well. And, I tell you, this is to invoke Yogi Berra. It's deja vu all over again. And this has been going on for a very long time. This declining funding for research, the agricultural enterprise, more broadly writ, has been going on for a very long time. There's been so much ink and speeches and things like that that's been invested in thinking about this and going to Congress and trying to get them to provide more funding. And that's happened. It goes through these spurts of increased funding and then drops off again, right? And in part, again, it is going back to what I invoked earlier about pogo, right? And I think in many ways we don't do a very good job of engaging with our legislators at the local level, at the state level, at our representatives, I should say, not legislators, and at the federal level. So we think that it's all funding is coming from the federal government. That constitutes a very small part of the overall construct of the funding that universities, land-grant universities particularly have. Right? A lot of the money comes from the local governments, for example, for extension, cooperative extension service, and the state government. As a matter of fact, there's a requirement that for every dollar the federal government provides, there's got to be a 1-to-1 match. Well, guess what? Many states provide maybe a 10-to-1 match. Okay, we don't take that into account. Some states provide 5-to-1 match, etc. We don't take them into account. So we got to do the storytelling, this communicating, and pointing out the outcomes that are impacting lives and things like that. All of us have referred to as well. That needs to happen every day, all the time. The shroud of secrecy that we've got, and we've got competing interests. Right? We got different things that are going on across the nation, across our local communities, and all that too. And so we're trying to get get the attention of the public. And we talk about signal to noise ratio. Right? We learned that in physics, for example, about the signal to noise ratio. We got to make sure that our signal about what's at stake here, about the critical societal challenges that we've got, about climate change, about diminishing water and land resources, about obesity, about the scourge of obesity, the health issues that we've got. A lot of the health issues that we see there is in part because of the food that we consume, the amount of food, the quality of food, and also the policies and regulations that we've got as well. So it's a construct of land-grant universities having been remiss in not engaging. And it's not just, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. in the month of February, March, then I'm going to maybe go to the local capital, state capital, or whatever once in a while. No, it's every day, all the time. Invite these folks to come in, the public to come in. Some universities do a phenomenal job of it, and others do a piss poor job. I know this personally because I've seen it happening across America. I've traveled to every one of our states. I've traveled to every one of our land-grant universities, and I've seen this happening. There's some that stand out as exemplars and some that don't do a very good job. Again, it's us, right? And one thing I'd encourage our folks that are online and people that are going to listen in later on to this recording is Go and reread the Land Grant Act, reread the Hatch Act, reread the Smith-Lever Act. Be inspired. They've got some amazing things. They talk about how to engage with the public, how to engage with the stakeholders and the stockholders that Marshall refers to as well. That's what it refers to, right? And in the chat box, I'll go ahead and drop links to those. Really, seriously, you would want to go ahead and reread those things if you've not done it. If you've never done it, read it. When I was in Washington, D.C., I found a copy of original of the Land Grant Act. I went, got it, we framed it and put it in my office. I don't know if it's still there or not in Washington, D.C. I hope it's still there because it inspired me. I'd read, it's only about 3 pages, I think, or 4 pages if I remember correctly. And I reread it and I was inspired by what it told us, right? And I think that's the curricular part of this whole thing. So I'll stop there and I hope I've answered.
No, I think some really excellent points on that, to research and again, getting back to, and it's again, not to get back to the old ways, it's getting back to putting the philosophy to work that was, again, so important when we put a land grant universities together. So I'm going to go to Nancy on some of the teaching question, because a couple of folks have raised a version of this, but open access for education, which obviously was a fundamental principle which we were founded, is a real issue for land grants. How do we get back to open access? Given the nature of higher education's ranking mechanisms that frankly discourage it. So we've heard the term elite tossed around a couple of times, Nancy. Just maybe your thoughts on this business of access to education and land grant responsibilities there.
Well, thank you. Thinking back to when the Morrill Act was passed, I would not have been in school. And we have greatly increased the diversity of our students over time. And I tried to do a little research on selective admissions by land-grant universities. Very difficult to do, but there are some land-grant universities that have set a bar that does exclude some of their citizens. And other universities have tried very hard to take everyone and to do some remedial work. There was a question in the chat, as I'll come through later, regarding whether students still have to do a lot of remedial work. I know at UK, students are classified as needing more work, and it's not called remedial, but needing more work. And we as a university do everything we can to get them up to speed in case they did not go through to a high school that allowed them to rank a little bit higher. So I don't know how widespread that is across the nation, but definitely to me, a land grant university should try to meet all the students who can succeed within their university. And it is probably worth thinking about the philosophy of every land grant university in this regard.
Yeah, and I think this gets back to a point you and Marshall both made earlier. There's a lot more options than there were in 1862. But, again, and unfortunately, and I think this was raised in one of the questions that you referenced, student preparation for college work is not where it needs to be nationally. I mean, it's a real issue. And so what models and pathways can we create to help that student be ready when they come to a campus becomes a pretty important question. And I think not every student is academically prepared, and that's an issue. And in our state, we're told not to do remedial kind of work. That's supposed to be done by somebody else, in the educational system. But we can be creative with respect to helping them find a place, a community college or another partner, to prepare and then make that transition to the campus as straightforward as it can possibly be. And we don't do that very well right now, at least, in my experience. I've seen it lots of places that the transfer programs are pretty cumbersome, and it's not so easy to get yourself ready and then move. So there's work to do here. And at the same time, you want to make sure that you're delivering an education that's going to push the student to be ready for the work world. So it's not a question of lowering standards. That's not going to be helpful in the end. So it's a really important question that people raise, but I do think the pathways idea becomes a pretty important one to help that student be ready and make it, again, as seamless as possible for finding their way to the option that's right for them. So here's another really good question, and all of you may have a perspective on this. given evolution over time, how close do you think we are to land-grant universities truly partnering and being more selective in what they each invest in and focus on, for instance, and what they don't offer? For instance, state X is an expert in one topic, while a neighboring state is an expert in another, and said expertise is shared to reduce duplication, increase relevance, better fit the modern approach to information, which knows no borders. This seems central to the ability to better integrate and be socially relevant. I think that's an excellent question. And again, all three of you may have some thoughts on that one. I don't know. Nancy, you want to kick us off on that one, and I'll go to Marshall and then Sonny.
Yeah, certainly. I know there are a lot of state partnerships by which land-grant universities work together to develop their expertise. Certainly the multi-state research program that doesn't get heralded all that much was designed to do that. And so I think that's a very good question, well considered, that we could probably do more partnerships among our land-grant universities.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Jay. I think it's not only among the land grants, but other universities that may have an expertise, as I said earlier. I think one of the tricky parts of this that universities face, and it's not just land grants, we have to decide what we're not going to do anymore. This is a very difficult question. We're really good at adding things on. We're never good at taking things away. And I think what's happened is we've almost, in some cases, you'll look at states that are close by to each other, and you're actually so similar. It would be interesting to think about, okay, you take this and you be really great at that, and we're going to really focus on this piece, and then we're going to partner and share more across lines. If we're going to be really strong in beef, then our neighboring state may be strong in dairy, for instance, and we may share in that. Obviously, stakeholders get kind of riled up when you go down that path because everybody wants their own, and you got state funding, and you got a lot of partners and a lot of stakeholders in this case to deal with in that. But it really makes a lot of sense. And I think distinctiveness is going to be really key for the future of universities. What are the distinctive things that K-State can offer that are unique and different and differentiate us? Differentiation is really important, especially when you're trying to convince legislators, for instance, to invest, because that's one of the questions. I was with, in fact, in the last 10 days, I have been with lots of legislators. We're doing a lot of work right now while they're out of session and speaking a lot with them. And I was with one yesterday, and one of the things that actually comes up in those conversations is they'll always say, and we'll say, well, this is something we want to do. And they'll say, well, who else is doing that? Or is this going to make us distinctive? Is it going to make us unique? What's our ROI? Are we not duplicating what somebody else is? And I think that's really important. And it's really important if you just take the land grant community. What I would encourage us to do more of is, I think, at senior leadership levels, having those conversations to think about that. I also know that something I know during Sonny's time at NIFA, we saw probably more of this, and we were doing it, sharing of extension expertise across state lines, which I know gets real tricky. Because again, you got state funding, you got county funding, you got a lot of things, but there's some real nuance in it. When I was at Missouri, we were partnering with K-State at the time on joint positions across in the Kansas City region, for instance, doing some things there, which is interesting that I'm on this side now and looking across the line the other way now. But it's, I think we have to be more nimble, more flexible, but also more distinctive. I think distinctiveness is going to be really critical. There are things that, as hard as we may work at K-State, we may want to be great at something, but it may not be the sweet spot for us, but there may be something else we can be extraordinary at. And we just need to figure out what those are. And I think those are really hard decisions, especially in a time when, again, our public policy people are looking at us more critically in terms of funding and trying to grow funds. I really think we got to recapture, again, I had the opportunity last year to be at Penn State and speak at a speaker symposium kind of thing there. And I was alarmed. Now, I'm not going to give you the statistic, but I was alarmed at how small amount the state of Pennsylvania puts into Penn State. I was stunned. And I know, Jay, I was at Purdue recently about it in the last year, and I had the opportunity to speak there, and I saw how the funding had changed in extension there and had really changed. And I was astounded. I had no idea in terms of the state investment. I think those are things we need to pay attention to that. There's a reason that's happening. And it's not, politicians are reflection oftentimes of their communities and who does that. It's, we get that upside down. We think, well, that's a bad politician. Those political leaders are reflecting what they believe their constituents want for the most part. And I think we have to figure that out and really, and we got to win the state. I go back to community, win the state, win the community. You win your state capital, you win the funding battle. Again, the partnerships will come along with that.
Nancy, did you want to say something else before I chime in?
Please. No, go ahead.
Nancy had her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No? Okay. All right.
I did
Sorry.
not intend to have
I
my hand.
misinterpreted that. Okay. So, a lot has been stated already, shared already, Jay, by both Nancy and Marshall. And both of them reference to some of the things that just want to touch on and emphasize as well. And I think all of your listeners know that statutorily, there's a requirement, federal government requirement to take money out of Hatch and Smith Lever funding and then utilize that to create these multi-state and regional projects, right? There's some that are run across the United States and many that are regional. And we have these regional research and extension groupings as well. And so the Experiment Station Committee, ESCOP and ECOP. I'm already forgetting what those ESCOP and ECOP and ACOP and all stand for. These, are the ones that facilitate these things, and these projects are vetted, and then they address these regional issues. And Jay, you may recall that back in the old days, 20 years ago, I should say, Purdue was a member of the Midwest Dairy Consortium, where, money was shared and positions were shared. As a matter of fact, Michigan and Ohio and Indiana shared in, expertises and things like that. Also with Kentucky, for example. These things were happening and they are happening as well, And unfortunately, because of budget issues and things like that, and I can share some really horror stories from some states, I'm not going to mention those at this point in time, where the money was yanked for these promises that have been made as well. So if there's a commitment made by a particular state saying, I want to be a partner in this, it needs to continue on for however long that particular project goes on. Second example, again, Jay, this one, is that the Big Ten used to have what is referred to as the CIC, Consortium for Institutional Cooperation. I think it's called something else at this point in time, where they shared in, being able to teach classes, where they shared in being able, actually, professors at this institution, there's reciprocity in, agreements and things like that. They could teach a class here, like in dairy science, or maybe in animal science, or animal genomics, or whatever it is, right? These were happening. They're still happening too. It's not like it's not happening. But because of diminishing resources, because of diminishing, greater challenges and things like that, people are kind of, stepping back from these sorts of things. But there's a statutory requirement that land-grant universities need to be participating. And then going back to what Marshall was talking about, it doesn't necessarily only have to be land grants that are part of these regional projects. It is non-land grants as well. I know a number of institutions, University of Texas and University of Kansas and others, that are involved in these efforts as well. MIT, for example. And by the way, when I was in Washington, D.C., I resurrected MIT's land grant status, which they'd given up back in 1914. I resurrected that in 2014 because they requested that to happen, and we went through the whole process as well. MIT, for example, is working on some critically important issues as well, and they're part of some of these consortia that we've got too. And I think, the adage, the West African adage about it takes a village, is critically important. These challenges that we see are so complex, and they go across the United States and go across the globe, right? Whether it's the diseases that are coming into America, for example, or whatever else. The one thing that kept me awake at night when I was in Washington, D.C., was the possibility somebody is going to introduce some insects or pathogens or whatever else. And we created this whole thing about tactical science, and it was intended to be this collaborative, cooperative effort as well. I think there's a lot of these sorts of efforts. Unfortunately, there have been destroyed or eliminated, by the way, particularly here in the recent past, unfortunately. And shame on what's happening in America. It's sort of, I lament what's happening in America at this point in time. The belittling of science, the belittling of intellectual pursuits, the belittling of this incredible innovation engine that we've got, all of that's being destroyed. I mean, literally in front of our eyes. I think we need to sort of wake up and not be, saying, oh, where's my few dollars that I get for my hash money or whatever else. But really at a bigger level, there's something really, really bad wrong with the situation that we've got in America. Sorry.
No, thanks for all the points you made on this a really, really important question. And I think, looking forward, I think if you pick on a characteristic of the land grant of the future, it's definitely going to be much more of this kind of collaboration. And frankly, if nothing else, money will drive it because there simply are not funds available to specialize in everything that we once did. I was part of a strategic conversation with 3 states recently, basically developing a strategic plan on how they're going to share resources to serve their stakeholders. Because again, they simply cannot. You cannot specialize in everything that a state produces on the ag side. So, and I think one of our listeners, John McNamara, raised up this National Academies report that was done on enhancing coordination, collaboration across land grants just a couple of years ago. That might be worth. Yeah, it would be worth taking a look at too in this particular question. So let me kind of stay in this theme. Maybe a bit of research. There's another really good question here. I work in partnership to commercialize tech and distribute commercial technology solutions to growers. And I'm curious about how we think about extension's role in engaging with startup and technology industries. My work with farmers and industry tells me there's serious demand and appreciation for access to new tech, but there's often a disconnect or political divide between extension and industry. My firm, we think we can probably help bridge that divide as a private partner to public institutions. So I don't know, Marshall, maybe, or Sonny, you want to pick up that one in terms of this partnership with the emerging ag tech sector and what's going on there?
Marshall, you want to go first? I can go if you
Sure.
want.
Sure. I think first of all, there's an opportunity to partner, and I think what you have to do is, again, it goes back to this idea that we don't have all the answers. We have good answers, and sometimes that person at the community level, if it be an agent, an educator, specialist, whatever it may be called in the state, may be running into that. What they need is the ability to connect back with the expertise on campus, first of all. And that campus expertise may not be in a college of agriculture. It may be in engineering. It may be in arts and sciences. There needs to be a pathway, a connector back to that. I know here at K-State, we have something called the Technology Development Institute, which in the College of Engineering, they do a lot of prototyping. They work with entrepreneurs. They do some incredible work across the state and actually regionally now with all kinds of things in innovation and community and are really known for that. Historically, that group has been really having to do its own outreach. Now we're connecting it right now. We're in the process of that with our extension network. Our extension folks in the state don't have to understand all the details. They just have to recognize this might be something that group could use and be helpful with. And we connect that dot. Another one would be a Center for Entrepreneurship we have here in our College of Business, which does a great job, but again, can limitedly get out. They don't have a network. Well, we got a networking extension. Again, that connector activity part of that. The other piece of that question, though, I think that's really true is that industry runs at a huge, rapid rate. They do. We know that universities are historically not known at moving at a rapid rate in some areas. We have more of a glacial pace in sometimes. We're just not noted for that. So what I think we have to do then is figure out those partnerships, and that's where public-private partnership comes together. We see that a lot more. We see that happening. I know in my past life, we've done it with commodity organizations where we jointly work with partner positions between extension and a commodity organization or some kind of group like that. I think you're going to, again, we got to break down and think differently about how we do that because it can't be just one way. And the other thing about this is what may work really well in Kansas may have absolutely no chance in Kentucky, and that's okay. What may work well in Kentucky may have no chance in Kansas. That's okay. What you have to do is really remember place, setting, opportunity, leverage you may have, and I think you have to work in those settings. Again, we sometimes put a national template on this, but there are regional and uniquenesses and opportunities that we have to be a lot more nimble with. So again, I think it's a combination of all that, Jay, and I'm sure Sonny would have other things to add on top of that.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. Very quickly, and I think, these relationships, these partnerships, and nobody has got the market cornered in terms of knowledge and ability to, work, come up with solutions to problems people face, right? And I think that the idea of these public-private partnerships, this has been going on for quite some time as well. Again, there's legislatively, I'm talking at the federal level, mandated requirements that certain types of funding that result in startups and boot camps and things that we created when we were at I was in Washington D.C. They have a requirement for these sorts of relationships, and extension is a core part of it. As a matter of fact, extension sits in the middle, right smack dab in the middle of it. If extension does not sit there and only the researchers are driving it, to your detriment. And I think that's this idea that Marshall referred to as well. Our extension colleagues, we have 3,143 counties and parishes in America, right? In the old days, we had a local extension agent in every one of those communities. But because of budget cuts and things like that, it got kind of scrunched down. We don't have that. As a matter of fact, we have these multi-county enterprises that are going on as well. But extension still has that connectivity. They serve on local, councils, and they serve on the people know them, right? They trust them. We talk about trust. Extension professionals are the ones that are trusted at that local level because people know them as well. So if we don't utilize, if these startups and others don't utilize the connections and the knowledge that they've got and the local knowledge that they've got as well, then, detriment to our detriment. And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, you've got a wonderful resource here. And why wouldn't you want to use it? And again, people like Marshall and the others that are involved in the, as vice presidents or vice provosts for extension or directors of extension, et cetera, they need to be out there, helping making those connections as well. And again, what are the incentives? We talked a little bit about incentives for our faculty and staff. What are the incentives for them to go ahead and engage with private sector partnerships? How can they take the knowledge of what's being invented or discovered in their particular lab? How can they take that work, translate that, and then get it disseminated? How can they connect with these private partnerships and things? I think this is a really important thing, and people are doing it. Contact me separately, offline. I'll give you examples of that too. There's some questions about stakeholders. Are there examples of it? I can, give you some examples of that. Connect with me separately and send me an email, and then we can connect as well offline. Thank you.
I think this question, certainly, if we're going to be relevant, we have to be connected with this community because it is driving the ag tech, the future of what we're going to be looking at. And a couple of quick points. One of them, previous president here that I worked under, Mitch Daniels, talked about the highest form of engagement was when a piece of Purdue research ended up in commercial space in some way, licensed, picked up and used in a patent, whatever. But it really, that message from the top really changed faculty attitudes about helping, again, move things from the lab into the world where they could be put to work. And I think it was a, really important point. And to this question, I had a farmer in my class on Tuesday in my careers class in ag business. And he was talking about the most important technology decisions he makes are the ones he does not adopt because he's got so many options right now, sorting through what's important on his farm and that's going to help him make money is really the key issue. And so, again, there is a role there for us in higher ed to play and to working in the private sector and helping sort those kinds of decisions out. So I think it's a really important point that was made by our listener. So, yeah, Amy, I'm going to
very quickly.
Yeah, Sonny.
Okay. One thing that, Ken Sheshki asked as well, have there been any economic analyses undertaken in the recent past? No, they've not been undertaken. But at Oregon State University, one of the things that we did was to create QR codes of connecting the science that went to put that particular item on the table at the football games, for example. In the boxes, right? When we're schmoozing with the donors and others and people that came to the ball game, you got 30, 40,000 people that are, it's a captive audience, and creating this QR code that connects that research, that extension effort to that particular individual that's eating that apple or that pear or that cherry, or that piece of meat or whatever it is, or that wine that they're drinking as well. That connectivity was really, really important. I think, it tells the story, going back to what you said, Jay, about what Mitch was referring to as well.
So let me shift gears. And Nancy, I'm going to give you this one. So a couple of questions sort of in this workforce development space. How can land grants embrace multiple college career pathways, skilled trade certifications, credentialing? There'll be only, for every 5 skilled trades in 2030, only be 2 people to fill those, this listener says. 4-Hers are doing electrical, welding, woodworking, mechanical, ag projects as early as 10 years old. Extension holds the keys to economic mobility. And another one about will there be a future where increased 2-year application-based programs within land grants? So you want to speak to maybe the land grant role in this whole workforce space? We got a couple of listeners that have asked questions in that area.
Yeah, and we're kind of doing everything everywhere all at once in these areas, I think, as land grants. We certainly are applauded internationally for our efforts to introduce technology into 4-H. University of Kentucky has an economic development collaborative right now that's reaching every county to help young entrepreneurs find a path. And that is one thing Extension can do in all states as well. Increasing our ability to help everyone get to an employable place is really important as well. Workforce development, we are doing workforce development all the time. We don't say that's what we're doing all the time, but we are increasingly, as a land grant system, involving businesses in our states in helping create curriculum. Internships are very important, internships and experiential education. And we just need to double down on everything we're doing to connect with employers and flavored on each state, but not necessarily restricted to each state, and better partnerships with employers.
Perfect. Marshall, you got thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, I think a couple things there. I think one of the things that we have to do, and I'm going to use an illustration. I had a situation last year, legislative session. We were pushing for some economic development things we were working on here at K-State. Had a legislator speak to me privately, individually, came over to me. He said, I want to ask you something. He said, why is K-State involved in economic development and workforce development? How does that work? And I will tell you, my jaw dropped. I had not been, there was an assumption I had. I was very respectful. I hopefully didn't show it, but it was a moment because fundamentally, if you go back to 1862, we've been in the workforce development business since the beginning because people get degrees and they go to work and they get a better job. We've been in economic development because our research and our students literally going into the workforce improve the economy. But I think there was an assumption on my part that that was that was something understood. I don't think we can assume that now because this person is a college graduate that I'm speaking of, has certainly done well legislatively, has a career, but they did the connection. They thought workforce development, economic development was Department of Commerce, and they thought it was community colleges and technical schools, which it is, but it's not exclusively there. We have a huge in fact, I'd say universities generally are one of the biggest economic development engines there is in a state. I mean, when you look at what we do and what we potentially could do, it's even more. So again, it goes back to connecting the dots and doing this due diligence. I think there's been some assumptions we've made over time that people just got it, and they don't just get it. And so it's one-on-one, it's building those relationships, it's communicating that. And again, I don't think you can market yourself out of this. I saw a question earlier about, how do you get presidents to understand this and boards and leadership at that level? And I will tell you what you have to do with our work is you have to put it central to their need. And so let's think about what universities are facing today. And just think about what legislators are facing today. Universities are facing an enrollment cliff, especially in the middle of the country. And they're scared to death of it. We are, because we know in 2026 things is going to get tougher. Yet we're growing. So there's going to be winners and losers in this. There's no question. What can we do in our system and with our assets, be it in extension or experiment stations or with our research and all our portfolio, to help grow enrollment for an institution? What can we do to bring value and show the connection between what we do and that? I was at Mizzou in 2016. They had a lot of stuff going in 2015, lost over 30% of their enrollment. When I rolled in there, I said, we're going to do recruitment nights, we're going to do FAFSA nights in every extension office. And we did it in a lot of them. We did that. We created a value. It was a different thing. We had never done that. Different value. We're beginning to do a lot of that here. So we create value. And so it connects the dots. So when you think about workforce, we have to bring legislators, policymakers, community leaders, influencers, uh, grassroots or grass tops, whichever you want to use, and there's a difference politically, but you want to bring those people in and let them see what you do and see how it connects. You cannot make that assumption. And it has to be an experiential thing. We do lots of things here to bring people together, to bring them in. We're recapturing that. We're using every asset we have to do that. Here, one of the things we're doing too, my portfolio is all things external. So corporate engagement, government relations, communication, marketing, extension. It's a unique thing. I mean, it's the theater, the museum, all the external things. I also touch athletics, our foundation. I touch our alumni. Have It's really unique. And something that Rich Linton, our president, wanted to do, and so we're doing it. You've got to get all that working together. Our extension people have to understand what corporate engagement is about. Corporate engagement has to understand why tech transfer is important for our research foundation. There has to be an understanding. Our own people don't even understand it, much less the public. And so we have to educate internally and externally at the same time. We're working hard at it, and we're certainly not great at it yet, but we're getting better. And I think sometimes we don't even know internally how to connect the dots, much less how can somebody outside connect the dots. So I think when you think about growing enrollment, when you think about those, we have to make ourselves much more accessible, open portals where people can flow in and flow out. We've got a lot of walls, and we said this earlier. I think Sonny mentioned it earlier about the siloedness. We got to bring those silos down because we cannot afford that right now. And so I think that all those things work together, whether it's enrollment, research, extension, whatever area you're in. I think it's all that working together to really live out what I think land grant should be now and going forward.
This question I think is a really important one because I mean, as you look nationally, the college going rate has been in decline. And down the road, there's just no doubt that education will continue to be important for the U.S. workforce. So what's our role in upskill, reskill of individuals who maybe didn't take the traditional path right out of the gate? I think is going to be a really important area that we need to think about where land grant universities need to engage. And I would just echo the listener's point about 4-H. I mean, what an amazing opportunity to help elevate and provide insights on the career possibilities. And I think that's such an important point for young people today is they even understand what's possible out there. And certainly we see 4-H making, young people aware of careers and opportunities and developing professional skills that they need and that employers are asking for. So again, several really important elements in that question. Let me ask this question now. I think it's a really good one as well. You become what you measure and reward. As long as land grant university presidents aspire to be just like elite private universities and reward only published research in the most prestigious journals, and when assessing tenure and promotion, it starts at the top. Yeah, I think, and one can ascribe that to just presidents, or you can just say universities in general have kind of moved that direction. But, speak to that one. I don't know who wants to maybe take that one. And Nancy, let's start with you on that question.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. It goes back to what I said about experiment stations now. They have two audiences. They have the research engine audience, and then they have, for example, the soybean growers out there. And certainly, and your article and others have made the point, certainly we are rewarding the high tech, high impact science, competitive grant, peer-reviewed science world a lot more than we're rewarding faculty that are serving the state directly. I think some universities, including Colorado State, has a promotion pathway that includes extension and outreach activities. University of Kentucky, we've talked about doing that, but absolutely there's an imbalance there in how we're rewarding our faculty. All that said, it's nice to be able to tell our constituents that we have in our arsenal to serve them folks that are looking 10 to 20 years out with their research programs, and that will eventually help our state. But and going back and going a little bit deeper on that, how we communicate this is really important. I talked about the Farm Bureau president wanting to know the why more, and the two National Academies reports, at least one of them that we've been talking about here, recommended that we completely double down on the way we communicate what we do and how we're driven to serve our states and our nation. So I think that hasn't been brought up yet, but communication is very important.
Excellent point.
Mm.
Anybody else want to speak to that issue?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts here, and I think it goes back to what Nancy spoke to, which, Jay, you and I referred to early on as we started this conversation, is really the incentives and disincentives that we've got on our campuses and how we recognize effort, how we promote, how we, offer tenure and things like that. And starting about approximately, in my mind, about the mid 1980s on, we got on this sort of a bandwagon that it's all about money, it's all about papers published in the most prestigious journals and things like that. It was all about how am I at Purdue going to do better than University of Illinois or Michigan State, or how am I at UC Davis going to do better than whatever else. I mean, that's was the sort of the modus operandi that we had as well. It just needs to, we got to step back a little bit. And Nancy referred to, some institutions that have indeed reconfigured how they do their promotion, how they recognize the scholarship of teaching, the scholarship of extension, the scholarship of research and things like that. It's not just, counting these, publications in some, journal and things like that. There's also a question about, presidents anymore. It's been like this for a very long time, by the way. Not all presidents of all land-grant universities have a land-grant university background. Many of them come, as attorneys. They come from the corporate sector. They are not grounded in the land grant ethos and that DNA that I have that DNA in me, and I dare say the rest of you have that DNA as well, is that land grant DNA. And many of these presidents don't have it. And it's about, how do I make sure that the board of trustees that has hired me, I'm, catering to their needs? How am I catering to the needs of the legislators, rather than how am I catering to the needs of the students that come to my institution? How am I catering to the needs of my population in my community, in my state, in my region, and things like that? And it just goes back to what is really, really like. We're going to hire somebody to come and take our football program, to be the number one program in the country, rather than how am I going to talk about, our discovery of the creation of these wheat varieties that Kansas State University did. We got to be celebrating those kinds of things. If I go on the street in Manhattan, Kansas, or in Lafayette, Indiana, or someplace like that, and ask them what's the statistics about the basketball player that plays for Matt Painter at Purdue, and they'll spout that number just like that. But if then I ask them, what did this individual that invented this ability to convert let's say soybeans into this plastic that can replace these microplastic things that we've got in the environment today, nobody knows about that, right? And shame on us. I think it's, some presidents, Mitch Daniels, I tip of my hat to him. He was one of the guys that did a tremendous job of it. Martin Jischke did a tremendous job of it as well. But most presidents don't get that sense of how to go about engage with the public and speak to these issues that we've got, right? And so that's a critically important thing. Yeah. And towards the end, if I have time, Jay, I'd like to go back to this workforce development if you've got the time to. So
okay,
let me stop here.
Jay, I want to add something to this thing. I think that there's two pieces of this. One is we've got to work really hard. If you work in a university today and you're faculty and you see the need to have more engaged scholarship, there are some great models out there. We've done a lot of work at that at K-State. There's been, I know, some great work. Jay at Purdue actually has done some good work. There's some good work going on around the country to really change that. To recognize it. And I'll use something that's outside. Some people have questioned about extension specifically, but you take something like tech transfer, and a lot of our universities are that's not even valued. If it's not, it's about publication, not what really impacted the community. So we're actually in a space right now at K-State looking at that. How do we work with our faculty senate, our governing bodies, all those colleges and et cetera, to try to change that, because quite frankly, the public is demanding it, and we need to be responsive again to our stockholder group. And so this is part of that disconnect we got to deal with. So some of that is at that level. The other thing that I really want to encourage people to do, though, is I understand the concern with rankings, and as Sonny has said, it's been going on for decades. And AAU and all the stuff that you see, and again, there's nothing. I'm going to say this. There's nothing. I mean, that's what the public looks at. That's what the public looks for. So again, it's being driven by the public, and boards and presidents are responding to that. I think what we have to do a better job of, though, is, and I'm going to I'll use my own self. I remember starting my work in Columbia, Missouri, and I was asked, what are we going to do a new strategic plan for extension, for instance? That was a question. I said, no, the university's going to do it. They're doing a strategic planning process. I want us to plug into that and see how we can add value to what they do. So our plan nested inside of their plan. We didn't have some separate plan over here doing our work. And I will tell you, it was a game changer for us. It truly changed a lot because at the institutional level, my former boss there, Dr. Moon Choi, really began to see the value of how our work impacted the institution. Their AAU, they were struggling. They really done well. They really, I mean, they're a surging university right now on lots of levels. And it was really fascinating, though, that I had to get myself and others over. I'm trying to do my little program or my college or my division. I'm a part of a university. The word university means one. And we got to figure out how to be a part of the university here. And we got to get the university to have us as a part of them. So the way you do that is you look at where what matters. If presidents are moving towards certain things and they're being pressured by certain things, we need to figure out what that is, and we need to work alongside of them to help add value to that. And fighting that, you're never going to win that. And boards and governing bodies, political powers will overshadow you. So you got to figure out, how do you come alongside of, how do you work within that? How do you frame it in a way? Sometimes it's the language we use. I'll use a word like agriculture, and I love agriculture, but really it's really about food and the environment and certain things like that. Sometimes the language does matter, and we have to frame it differently. We have to think about, health, human and animal health, soil health. There's lots of things we can use there. I think a lot of it's framing, and I think it's, again, in the mechanics of the institution, faculty working through them, getting that scholarly work included to make sure it's there, but also at the institutional level, really understanding where this thing's going. And so often our work, we're not connected structurally, and so we don't know. We just don't know what we don't know. And so but if we knew, we might tweak our work a little differently to, again, advance the institution. I have found, again, working across 3 institutions now, great universities, NC State, Mizzou, and now K-State, that if I can find a way to add value to where the institution is trying to go, if I can show how our work brings value, I can find it's a pretty easy path, but you got to figure that out. And that's hard. It's the hardest work you'll ever do, but if you do that well, I think it just, all tides rise together. All ships will rise together. And so I don't want people to be discouraged by that. I want people to lean into that and let's figure this thing out, because I think we got a lot at stake here. And I think it's at a crossroads. We use that term a lot. I do think we're at a pinch point on that.
Yeah. And I just a couple of quick observations that I'm an economist. I can't help myself. I think money's going to drive more focus on a broader set of metrics to evaluate faculty. I mean, we've been very, very focused on a set of things that were heavily tied to federal research funding and all the things that made possible. But as tuition revenue becomes even more important in the future and dependence on state money may become more important, I think it's going to help charge us all to recalibrate a little bit in how we unleash faculty creativity by giving them license to work in engagement and teaching areas as scholars. And I don't know. I think that's coming and will be part of our future. So we are getting close to the end of our time, and I want to give everybody a chance to make one final maybe set of points here about this business of recasting Morrill. So in terms of just a few maybe key elements of the land grant of the future. So the question really, we had recasting Morrill in the title of this seminar, but what are some of the key elements, just in kind of a summary form, of what the land grant of the future looks like? Because we had that question come up in the in the chat. And maybe, Sonny, start with you with maybe some of the observations about, what are a few of the key elements you think of as you think about the land grant of the future?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jay. Again, thank you very much to Tim Brennan and the Farm Foundation for inviting us to be part of this, really important and timely conversation as well. I posted in the chat box the links to the Morrill Act and the Hatch Act and the Smith-Leo Act, and I asked people to, if you've not read it, read it. If you've read it, reread it. and reread it every so often so you get a sense of what this is all about, what's at stake for us as humanity, for example, not just as a nation. And going back to the Morrill Act, which I reread all the time, what was articulated, three things needed to happen, right? In this democratization of education. Number one was foundational education, which is, foundational knowledge in reading, writing, arithmetic, the three R's, for example, right? And science and things like that. Everybody needed to have that. And the second thing was the practical, that's the operative word here, practical education in agriculture and mechanic arts, the A&M, right? It was hands-on learning. We call it experiential learning today and things like that. And the third thing that Morrill speaks to, Justin Smith Morrill speaks to, is military leadership. Not so much learning how to shoot guns, as much as critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, working in a team environment, and things like that. And Jay, you and Mike Bolin and others, and myself as well, we have undertaken surveys about what our employers of our students need. They talk about these, in quotes, soft skills, what I refer to as core competencies. This is the critical thinking, problem solving, and all that. And if you've not seen it, this Sweeney, gosh, man, her name is in Forbes magazine. She published a recent article that speaks to, the title of it really struck me was "Who Needs Professors When Knowledge is Free?" or, something like that. And on my LinkedIn post, I spoke to it as well. And, it talks about how in AI, in the world of AI and all this Google and stuff that's available, they can quickly give you all this information, right? But that information is worthless if you don't have the human intervention in it. And what the recasting of the Morrill Act, recasting of the land grants is about that human intervention in this context of artificial intelligence and this quick access to knowledge and things like that. That's what Extension brings to the table. That's what land grant universities bring to the table as well. There is the raison d'etre of why we still need the land grants as well, because these are addressing these critical issues. AI is not going to address the issue of climate change. It's going to be the people that are doing the work that can utilize AI as a supporting actor in helping address these issues related to climate change or other critical issues that we've got as well. So even in the context of AI, going back to what Justin Smith Morrill said, take that to heart. It is still really critically important. I sent Jay a link to a speech that I did here, or a conversation I had here recently about what's at stake for us. And I think it's really, really important to think of as well. If you have not seen it on LinkedIn, or in Forbes magazine, there's an excellent article by this woman named Sweeney, and take a look at it. It's Shannon McKean. Gosh, I messed up here. It's a guy. Shannon McKean is the guy's name, and he asked this question as well. Why do we need professors today? So I want to stop there. I think there's a raison d'etre for continuing to do this. It's about workforce development. It's about making sure humanity can, continue on, even despite all of the stuff, this narrative that's been created that AI is somehow going to take care of the world's ills. And we've seen what such claims have done previously as well.
Thanks, Sonny. Nancy, your comments on kind of maybe some key elements of the land grant of the future.
Thank you, Jay. Reflecting back to when the land grant universities were formed, they were formed based on principles of democracy and access and trust and serving one state, but being part of a federal system. We've got to work on our trust. Most of the surveys that we've talked about that don't have confidence in higher education are politically differentiated by party. And we're going to have to be successful land grants of the future. We're going to have to re-engage the people, perhaps by our offering access, perhaps by doubling down on our ability to provide true, unbiased information in this sea of information. So I'm optimistic, but I think we have to reclaim a certain set of our citizens.
Great point. Great point. Marshall.
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to jump right on something Nancy said. Even though we have lots of challenges, there's never been a more exciting time to be involved in this work than right now. And I think that's really, really important that we not see all the challenges as inevitabilities, but let's get after it. Let's fix it. And so I'm going to give you what I believe about the land grant. Number one, we got to focus on serving, being servant leaders, and that's what I think. When I read through it, Sonny, that's what kind of comes out at me. We're here to serve a public good, so serve. I think a second thing we got to do is make sure we're relevant and that we're really meeting needs that people can identify with. And we do that. We got to be relevant. We just got to do a better job of that. I think the third thing we got to do is be responsive. When there's a need, we need to respond to that. And it may not be something we have at K-State. It may be something else I know about another institution that I could bring. But we got to be responsive to people. People appreciate that. I think the fourth thing we got to do is we got to deliver. We got to deliver a high quality education, high quality research, high quality engagement. We got to deliver every single day, and there's no day off. There is no day off on this. Every day we got to deliver. So when you serve, when you are relevant, when you're responsive, and you deliver, you're actually exhibiting leadership. And that's what I think is probably the thing. We need people that are listening into this, regardless of where they sit. They may be outside of the university, they may be inside the university, they may be with the Farm Foundation, they may be an extension agent or research, whatever they are. We need people to lead and to lead these conversations and to be champions on this stuff. Because again, I believe we serve and we're relevant and we're responsive and we deliver. If we do that every single day, those things every day, show up every day, do that, we can get this thing where it needs to be. And that's not a return to the past. That's a way forward of where we want to be. So I'll stop there, Jay. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been great to do this conversation. I've enjoyed being with Nancy and Sonny, two people that I have watched from afar for a long time and been close to a few times, but really enjoyed it. And thank you again, Jay.
No, I appreciate all three of your perspectives going forward. And, I think we touched on a number of elements throughout this conversation on things that'll be important to the land grant of the future. One that lives its land grant mission, these principles that were laid down so long ago and integrates that mission across the campus. One that elevates the teaching engagement enterprises and puts those on par with the research enterprise. That we talked a lot about stakeholders and connections to stakeholders and relationships. We got into this issue of rewarding broader areas of scholarship and not just one narrow area, I think was another one. This business of multiple pathways to the academic programs that we have and access and rethinking that. Serving lifelong learners, we talked about those a bit as well. And then thinking about activity and coordination across state lines. I mean, so we got into a lot of specifics too that I think are maybe characteristics of where land grants are going as they attempt again to deliver on the potential that was laid down by Morrill and Hatch and Smith Lever. So I just thanks so much, Sonny, Nancy, and Marshall for giving us your time today. Really, really appreciate your insights. And Tim, I'll turn things back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jay. A wonderful moderator, as I knew you would be. And thank you to our panel, Sonny, Marshall, Nancy. You were all just absolutely fantastic. And to our audience, thank you. I don't think I have ever seen a more robust Q&A section going on. I think that might be the record for the amount of questions submitted during a forum. So I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to them all, but thank you so much. We appreciate your engagement and love to hear your feedback about this forum. So the survey that you get, please fill it out and let us know your thoughts. And again, if you enjoyed this session, please share it on your social media and think about supporting Farm Foundation. There's a link in the chat for you to do that. Once again, thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. We'll now conclude this forum.